Chapter 3. Aroused Suspicions. A disaster siren wailed across the experimental station as an orange-red inferno glowed behind the quartz window of the test booth. Slowly, Tom and Bud sat up, struggled to their feet, and eyed the wreckage of the laboratory in dismay. Books, file cabinets, electronic gear, and other valuable equipment lay tumbled across about the floor amid the shattered glass from fallen racks of test tubes. Smashed bottles of chemicals sent reeking fumes through the labs. "Good grief! What happened?" Bud gasped. "The atomic power capsule exploded, generated too much pressure, and blew up," Tom said grimly. Though dazed and bruised from their fall, neither boy was injured. Already scouts could be heard outside the laboratory as plant employees rushed to investigate the explosion. "Bud, tell everyone to keep them out," Tom yelled. As Bud hurried to comply, Tom glanced quickly at the radiation level indicator. "Thank heavens," he muttered. Evidently, the reaction products had been safely confined within the test booth. Tom snatched up the telephone and dialed Ames at security. "Bud and I are okay," he reported, "but the atomic reaction got out of hand. Get the decontamination squad down here pronto." The next few hours were spent in harried efforts to cope with the disaster. Tom finally organized a procedure to draw off the radioactive residue safely from the booth after the reaction had cooled. This would take several days. Then, the booth itself would have to be dismantled and construction materials carefully disposed of. It was late afternoon when Tom finally slumped into a chair in his office to relax over a pot of hot cocoa with Bud. "Tough luck, Skipper," Bud sympathized. "Did you expect this might happen?" Tom shrugged. "I knew the risk was there, but I thought I had the pressure problem licked. I used the strongest suitable metal I could find for the capsule casing, the lunite alloy we discovered at the Phantom satellite. And still, the capsule blew up." "Right," Tom said gloomily. "Hang it all, Bud. I'm afraid there is no metal that's strong enough, and yet light enough to contain my power plant reaction process." "Don't worry, you'll lick it yet," Bud said, patting his pal on the shoulder. "Bet you have a new schedule of experiments all figured out." Tom plowed his fingers through his crew cut and grinned ruefully. "Wish I did. This means our Atomicar announcement will have to be postponed, and I won't even be able to use the special lab for the next few days." The young inventor was not deterred from work by the accident. He decided, for the balance of the afternoon, to use one of the smaller labs and try some further communications experimenting with his Circon Arc-powered Ruby Master. "Want to watch?" he invited Bud. "Sure. I haven't seen this gadget of yours yet." The boys entered the lab and Bud took a close look at his friend's device. Looks like a fancy searchlight, set on an oversized pistol. "Okay, Professor, give me a breakdown of what's what." Tom grinned and pointed the larger end of the cone-shaped metal contrivance's housing. "Inside this part is a powering light reflector, flash lamp, and condenser for powering light." Tom's finger moved to the narrowed neck of the device. "In here is the ruby rod itself. The smaller end of the maser contained the focusing output lenses." "And what are those for?" Bud inquired, pointing at two flexible tubes leading into the ruby rod section. "They're for cooling the rod, which is silvered at both ends, by a flow of fluid through them. This third tube powers the flash lamp." "And what's this part that reminds me of a gun trigger?" "It's a hand mount, and the trigger here is the switch for turning on the power." On top of the ruby rod section was a control for focusing, and underneath the base of the maser was a mount for tripod operation. "I'll try sending a message to the outpost," Tom said. "Shoot!" Bud urged eagerly. Tom plugged in the small throat microphone and aimed the unit directly overhead. "I hope to make this model 100% portable soon, so we can communicate with the space station at any time," he explained. The brief message Tom flashed took only a couple of seconds. There was a few minutes' wait. Finally, over the receiver came the response. "Got your message, Skipper. Not very clear, but I'd say that maser could really save the day if necessary. Over." "Just testing this time," Tom signaled back. "I'll be in touch with you." After he signed off, Bud, greatly intrigued, said, "Wonder if you could reach any other beings in space." "Let's find out." Tom beamed a signal, but several attempts brought no response. Bud grinned. "Maybe if you weren't such a cheapskate and used real rubies, you'd have better luck." "I agree," Tom said. "If you see any unused ones lying around, pal, let me know." That evening, after the others had returned from cruise, Tom brought them up to date on the day's events. Then he said, "Dad, I've just been reading some reports from the Citadel. I'm pretty sure they've given me a new lead on casings for my midget power plant." The Citadel was the Swift's atomic research plant in New Mexico. As Mr. Swift listened with interest, Tom explained that he was impressed by the data on a stable isotope of one of the new man-made elements. Its physical and chemical properties sounded as though the isotope might be promising in developing a new covering for his atomic power capsule. In fact, I think I'll fly out to the Citadel and work on it in the lab there for a few days, Tom said. Oh, what a super idea, Sandy burst out when she heard the plan. Bud will be going, I suppose, and school's over, so why don't Phil and I go too? And naturally you'll come along too, Cousin Ed. Tom agreed with a smile, but Ed Longstreet declined. It may sound silly, but I think I'll hop back to New York for a day or so. I'd like to see what I can dig up in the public library there on that last ruby mine in Kabulistan. Sandy darted to the telephone to call Phyllis Newton. Phil's father was not related to the Swifts, but was always called Uncle Ned by Tom and Sandy. Mr. Newton, Mr. Swift's old comrade in arms, was now manager of the Swift Construction Company, which manufactured the Swift's inventions. Phil was enthusiastic over Sandy's idea and quickly obtained her parents' consent. The next day at noon, the four young people watched as the Sky Queen was hoisted from its underground hangar at Swift Enterprises and hauled by tracker to a special runway. This huge atomic-powered plane, often called the Flying Lab, had carried Tom on his first adventure when he found himself pitted against a band of South American rebels seeking valuable radioactive ore deposits. Recently, he had invented the electrohydrolung, using it to search the ocean depths to recover a Jupiter probe lost in the South Atlantic. As Tom checked certain equipment aboard, a foghorn voice suddenly rattled his eardrums. "Brand, my apples dumplings, you ain't heading west without me, are you, boss?" Chow Winkler, the general cook of all Swift Enterprise expeditions, came stalking out the airfield, dragging a cart full of groceries behind him. The former chuck wagon cook from the Texas Panhandle had first met the Swifts on one of their research trips to New Mexico. As usual, the roly-poly chef was decked out in a 10-gallon hat and a gaudy sports shirt. "Hey, look out!" Bud warned to the girls loudly, eyeing Chow's flame-colored shirt with a fearful expression. "I thought we had that atomic explosion all caged up." "You're just jealous, buddy boy," Chow snapped as Sandy and Phil laughed. Turning to Tom, he said, "Well, how about it, boss? Am I coming?" "Sure you're coming, old-timer," Tom said soothingly, throwing his arm around the old Texan. "We planned this trip on such short notice I forgot to let you know." In 5 minutes, the Sky Queen roared off the runway, streaking westward at transonic speed. The sleek, swept-winged three-decked aircraft reached New Mexico in an hour. As the painted canyons and mesas flattened into barren scrubland, the Citadel came into sight about below, a pinwheel formation of ultramodern laboratory buildings and dormitories. They were grouped around a massive central dome of white concrete which housed the main reactor. The whole research plant was ringed with barbed wire and guarded by drone planes and radar. As soon as they landed, Tom buried himself in his private laboratory. He was still deep in work the following afternoon. Bud and the two girls, knowing it was useless to disturb him, drove off in a jeep for a picnic at one of their favorite spots. Suddenly, Bud braked the jeep to a halt on the sandy trail. "Hey, what's that joker doing up there?" he muttered suspiciously. On the mesa just above them, a figure was seated at an easel, peering through binoculars. "Looks like an artist," said Phil. "Then why is he snooping at the Citadel through those glasses?" Bud demanded. The glasses certainly appeared to be trained towards the atomic research plant. Bud jumped from the jeep and scrambled up the boulder and brush-strewn slope. The figure at the easel. The glasses certainly appeared to be trained towards the atomic research plant. Bud jumped from the jeep and scrambled up the boulder and brush-strewn slope. The figure at the easel, a youngish, wiry-looking man with tousled carrot-red hair, paused long enough to glance at him, then returned to his binoculars. "What's the idea of those glasses?" Bud snapped. "To see better," the man replied tersely. "I'll bet you can," Bud said. "In case you didn't know it, that's a top-secret research station." "I'm not likely to steal any secrets at this range," the red-haired man looked Bud up and down with a grin, then raised the binoculars to his eyes again. Enraged by this fellow's apparent arrogance, Bud snatched the glasses from his hand. "Give those back, please," the stranger demanded. "I'll give you a poke in the jaw if you don't explain what you're doing," Bud stormed, grabbing him by the front of his polo shirt. Next thing Bud knew, a fist exploded into his face. The husky young pilot staggered back, then dropped the binoculars and waded in with his fists flying. "Bud, stop it," Sandy commanded as she and Phil came running up the slope. Between them, the girls managed to separate the opponents. "Bud, this is Orton Throme. He's the famous abstract painter. And Mr. Throme is a well-known war hero and jet pilot," Phil added. Bud stopped short, his jaw dropping open as he suddenly remembered various magazine accounts he had read about Ort Throm and his Marines fighter squadron. "I'm sorry, Mr. Throm," he said, thrusting out his hand. "Guess I acted too fast." "Pretty powerful Ev took you, Thro," the ace chuckled, shaking hands. "Can't blame you for being suspicious, I guess. I shouldn't have been conning the Citadel with binoculars. Call me Ort, by the way." "I'm Bud Barclay," Bud replied. "This is Sandy Swift and Phyllis Newton." The introductions were cut short by Sandy gasping in dismay. "My ruby ring! It's gone!" The ring, a bit too large, had evidently slipped off her finger as she attempted to stop the fight. Bud's face flamed with embarrassment when he discovered the ring under his foot, the metal band badly bent. Ort Throm suggested that the ring could be repaired by a famous jewelry designer in Taos, several miles away. Both Sandy and Phil were delighted at the idea of visiting the famous art colony. Before the conversation ended, Ort had accepted an invitation to join their picnic. The next day, Bud and the girls persuaded Tom to take the afternoon off from his lab work and drive with them to Taos. The highway wound along the Rio Grande amid rabbit bush and wildflowers. Taos itself proved to be a quaint old western town nestled at the base of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Some of the huge cottonwoods shading its dusky streets had been there since the days of old Kit Carson, its most famous citizen. Tom drove through the bustling plaza to the Indian reservation a few miles distant. Taos Pueblo, built before Columbus discovered America, rose from the plain at the foot of the Smoky Blue Range like a child's brown mud castle. It was rectangular and terraced, with crude wooden ladders leading up from one story to the next higher one. Black-haired Indians, garbed in blankets, sat before the turquoise and red doors of their apartments. "How fascinating!" Phil exclaimed. After touring the settlement, Tom drove back to town. Here an Indian directed the visitors to the adobe studio of Ben Garth. The jeweler's eye lighted as Sandy showed him her ring. "I've never seen a ruby quite like this before," he said, examining the stone through a jeweler's loupe. "It looks rather like the kind from Afghanistan, but this has much finer fire." "Do you really think it came from Kabulistan?" Tom asked casually. Garth looked up at him. "Oddly enough, I do. I've seen only a few museum specimens from the Kabulistan mine, but this certainly resembles them in color." At that moment, Phil gasped and pointed toward the window. As the others turned, they saw a dark-featured man in an oriental turban suddenly duck out of sight. Okay, that's chapter 3. I'll be back tomorrow. Good night.